Yes,
Great.
awesome.
Thank you so much, DC Zine Fest, for having me, and thank you, Erica, for that lovely introduction. I will share my screen shortly. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about um, what it means to share your story and the basis behind Buah Zine. So let me get, oh gosh, sorry. Okay, so, okay, so I'm gonna save time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions, I would love for you to be able to ask at the end of this. So I'm gonna go right in. Why zines? So basically, I got interested in zines um, around 2013, 2014 when I was on Tumblr, and I followed some Black and Latinx zine makers, and I was really inspired by their work. And from a young age, I was actually a magazine subscriber, so very on and off subscribing to American Girl magazine, and I was buying, Teen Vogue and 17 magazine way too young. I had to like tape the sex and health sections and show my mom that I was not interested in those sections at all. So I've loved magazines from the very beginning. I like that they're like a time capsule of that month or that season. And so that for me translated to my love for zines very easily. And when I saw these zine makers create their own platforms and their own issues, I thought that, oh, this is such a great way to see stories that aren't really covered in mainstream magazines. And it's a great way for, marginalized folks to really highlight their own stories and have their own voice. So that's why I really love zines and really appreciate what they've done and the community that I've gotten out of it. But that wasn't really the start of Buah Zine. Really, the start of Buah Zine came about. So I launched the website in 2018, but it was an idea that I had for some time. So I grew up in upstate New York, but I was born in Jakarta. I came to the US when I was a baby, and the place that we lived, there was a small Indonesian community that was of mostly international students connected to the college there. My parents were quite involved in the community, and I saw from a very young age that they were committed to finding community wherever they could go. So there would be some long road trips, to North Carolina, to Pennsylvania, to Boston, to Kentucky, where we would meet with other Indonesian folks. And that was really like a formative experience for me of seeing my own parents feel that, that was an important aspect to have that community. But by the time that I was in middle school and high school, that community started to fade away. One, because, grad students have a deadline essentially of being here. And so most of the students went back to Indonesia. My parents had the opportunity to stay in the US and they decided to do that. And then also, I was getting into my preteens and teens. So I was becoming more involved in like my school community. And so that feeling of wanting that Indonesian community kind of like faded away as being, one of the only Indonesian person in my friend group at school. But then it came up again when I first moved to Washington, D.C. in 2012. There's actually a very sizable Indonesian community here in the DMV area. I didn't know that coming into here, but actually the start of my school year started at the Indonesian ambassador's house at 17-an, which is August 17th is the Indonesian Independence Day. So I went to a ceremony there, and that's when I met some young Indonesians about my age, and they had grown up in the DC area, and they shared their experience with me, and it was so different from my experience, but it was so it was like a very enlightening encounter, because they grew up in the DC area and they grew up with this very constant, well, mostly constant Indonesian community. And they grew up with, their friends were Indonesians. They went and did Indonesian dance classes after school. So that was like a really interesting experience that I was like, oh, wow, imagine growing up with that. I couldn't. So it was really great to hear that experience. Um, and then I became more interested, I guess, in diaspora, in the Indonesian diaspora, having read about other diasporic histories, and realized that there wasn't really a space specifically addressing like the Indonesian diaspora or Indonesian diasporic experiences. And I started to feel that way more as I became involved in Asian American spaces in college, and and felt that there was a missing perspective. Um, so, I was waiting for someone to create such a space. And I was finding that there wasn't really a space for that. So I decided, okay, instead of waiting around, I'm just going to go ahead and start it myself. And hopefully, there will be more and more spaces, and more people will be able to share their stories. So that's how in 2018 I started Buah Zine. So here's just a sampling of some of the people that I've interviewed so far. Yeah. So some challenges and lessons that I want to share with everyone is, when I first started the zine, I had to think really deeply about, why am I starting it? So, Buah Zine is not a project of nationalism. I really would love to stress that. It's really important that the way that I worded it was Indonesian heritage rather than Indonesian, because I didn't want it to be tied to, passport or nationality. But, even that language is limiting as much as I want it to be as open as possible. So I thought of that, and I also thought about, who is my audience? And I really wanted to make sure that Buah Zine is for other people of Indonesian heritage and diaspora. So yeah, these are some of the things that I thought about, and I really, had to. Um, so yeah, I sorry. um, yeah, I, I, I. It took some time for me to think that I could do.
Oh no, looks like they're having some trouble with the internet. I'm just gonna text them real quick.
Hi.
Oh,
Sorry, did you lose me?
there you go.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, you're good.
All right, let me come back to my presentation. Okay. So yeah, I really felt that I didn't have the skills to make a zine, because I didn't have, the Photoshop skills, or I didn't really know how to do this or that. So I, was talking myself out of creating a zine for a while. But, I just felt like, okay, you know what? I I should just start it and I'll figure it out. And surely, if I need help, I will ask for help along the way and I'll figure it out. And thankfully, it hasn't been too hard to make a zine. Buah Zine is made on WordPress, and I use that for free. And I may not have Photoshop skills, but I use, free programs like Canva here. And also, I got advice from other people to use, like, if I want to sell the zine online, to use like Blurb and other platforms. So it's been a, I continue to learn even though I'm 3 years in. But yeah. Um, let's see. Okay. Any questions? I know I kind of sped through that, but I wanted to make time for any questions here.
That was fantastically interesting. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
I'd be really curious to hear what the reception has been like. Um,
Yeah. So I definitely, when I started it in January, I didn't think that anyone really would read it or, interface with it at all. I honestly did think that it would just be like my friends and like maybe one or two other people would, be interested in it. So that's how I started. I truly did not think like it would have the reception that it has today. So I've been able to connect more with, as many people in as spread out as possible. The interviews include people who live in Australia, who live in Hong Kong, who live in the Netherlands. And so that has really been a goal to like connect with as many different people as possible. It did start off with people here in the US, but I'm very interested in connecting with as many people as possible, and it has been possible to do that. I really didn't think it would be, but yeah, it's been really great.
I see we have a question in the chat from Dirk. Sounds like Dirk would love to hear a little more about interviewing ethics.
Oh.
You're able to speak on that.
Yes. So my background is actually in journalism. So I did go to journalism school and I took a journalism ethics class there. I didn't really learn my ethics in that class per se. I kind of learned like that class kind of made me form or like think about my own ethics, but I did, build it up from that journalism perspective. So when I talk about interviewing ethics, I really want to talk about, when you interview someone and you post that interview on the internet, that is going to affect, like, how will that affect their life, especially if, they're not a person on the internet, they're just like a regular person, they're not like an artist or a writer or anything, So, I want to ask them seriously, like, oh, is it okay if I include these links? Or like, are you comfortable with me sharing your last name? So just thinking about the safety of other people as well. We might talk about something during the interview that later on they'll be like, oh, actually, I don't want this included due to personal safety. And so, that is something that I take very seriously. So of course, like I will, this is a very casual interview. That's important to me that you feel safe that this interview is out there. So of course. When I start the interview, I try to, I do record audio for my notes. So I mentioned that like, okay, I'm recording right now, and just making sure at the beginning, I also talk about like, oh, I might ask some questions. If you feel uncomfortable with these questions, feel free to change the subject or say, you don't want to answer that question, or you might need some time. So I try to give, the interviewee as much, uh, they're the ones really leading the interview. But also, if I do have questions, we're kind of like, I want to make sure that the balance is there with the interview.
I'm also curious to know how many issues have you published so far?
So I do an issue every summer. So this will be the third issue coming up, but so far just 2 issues. I'm working on a project that I have in my mind, but I haven't put it out there yet. So there might be a special issue coming up, but that is in the works. It's just me. I Buah Zine is open for submissions, so people are welcome to submit year-round their work, whether it's photography, whether it's poetry, essays. So I'm trying to build up that section a little bit more. But yeah, right now it's just me. Thankfully, I do have a day job, so I'm able to do this. I'm able to not rely on this as like my sole form of income. But yeah, I try to do it in whatever spare time that I have. So, I'm waking up early to do interviews, or I'm staying up late to do interviews, and I'm transcribing. But yeah, just whenever I have free time, I try to work on my zine. Oh, let me show you. So this is the the zine here. This is issue 1, and you can see the insides here. There's the shortened interviews are here, and some photos. Here's issue 1, and here's issue 2. Um, so I use this platform called Blurb. I think some people have used it. They have a software that's um, that's kind of like Adobe Illustrator. It's called like Bookish or something like it. But you can like lay out the zine like so, and then it will make a PDF available for you. So actually, these zines are available to also read fully online. Let me share that. Uh, okay. And so, yeah, you can see that you can take a look. I have an issue, and then you can scroll through it online for free. So both of the issues are online. And yeah. Okay. Oh, and then this is obviously what it looks like online. buahzine.wordpress.com. You can see these are the last interviews that I did. We have playlists, and I made a list of artists that you could see virtually. So yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the printing source that I use for the online is Blurb, but I also use a local printing here in DC. It's called Rush Hour Printing. And I got pretty good rates, and I just send them the PDF, and they ask like what type of paper that I want, and yeah, it was pretty easy to go through them. And I use the local printer here when I have to do like a really quick turnaround. Okay. Yeah, so the indie publishing process, yeah, just using Blurb was I kind of just did that. I'm starting to like think about like more creative ways, or maybe more hands-on ways to make the zine. But yeah, just doing it through Blurb was kind of what I did. But they do make you, like, if you do use their program to make the PDF to download it costs like $4, even though you just made it. So yeah, there's some budgeting aspects that definitely, like, if you're trying to like sell it online, that you have to like think about. Okay. Yes. Go for it, Jeff.
Misclick.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Thank you. Oh, yeah. So, how I balance the zine with my work. So now it's been a little bit harder to do that because, so I used to work overnights. And so I would work on the zine in the day. But now it's been harder since, now I'm actually working in the daytime. So I think I'm still learning myself how to balance it, but so far what I've learned is that I have to be gentler with myself, like I'm not, even though like deadlines are important, like personally, I also have to remember like this is a project that I'm doing out of love and, because I love to do it. So I don't want to turn it into like a second job. So I have to, be gentle with myself and remind myself like, okay, yes, maybe you're not transcribing at the rate that you should be, but also it's okay to not do that as well. Transcribing is really hard. So it's okay to like give yourself a break for a week and then come back to it later. Um, I'm probably, as they say, my harshest critic. So, but it's just a process of kind of learning like, okay, you don't have to do everything. Like this is not your second job. So don't turn it into something that is just going to be another chore for you. So a question here is, has the original concept for the zine matched the zine that's published, or has it changed over time? It's definitely changed over time. I think, I would love the printed zine to stand on its own. So I'm trying to think of more ways to make it, stand apart from the online content. But I do want to make it as like available as possible. So I think the online component is really important. I've had people ask, am I interested in doing a podcast or starting a video series? I don't know. That definitely sounds like a lot of work. My background is in like print journalism, so this is something that I'm really comfortable in. But I'm definitely starting to think more of like, what else can Buah Zine do for sure. Okay, so someone has the great Anastasia has asked, do you have a specific approach when it comes to bringing up these topics with the people you interview about Indonesian history and politics and social issues? I don't know that I have a specific approach. It definitely depends on the interview. As you're interviewing someone, like as you get kind of like the regular, like the basic questions out of the way, you kind of gauge how they're feeling. Are they up to talking about politics or history? And so basically what I start with is kind of like, what is your, what kind of stories did you grow up? That's a question that I usually ask everyone. And then that's when I learn from them, like, oh, they grew up with stories of their parents telling them like how they grew up under the Suharto dictatorship, or, how their grandparents, participated in the Indonesian Revolution or things like that, like, so that's how I gauge, from basically from like a personal level first, like, did your, what was that experience like for you? So usually I start with like the personal, and then we got into the like, okay, what are your thoughts on, the recent election, and what are your thoughts now on recent laws that are, being contested? So yeah. And does each issue have a theme? No, it's just here are some great interviews and content that y'all should have in physical form, because it's nice to hold a thing and flip through pages. And which have been your favorite discussions? Oh, that's so hard, because I feel like every discussion has been really, I've felt like I've learned something new every time I talk to someone. So it's tough to say which is my favorite one. but I definitely I do love speaking to like artists, you know, writers, poets, people who do digital art. Like that's one of my favorite things to talk about with other people and learn how their art, their heritage influences their art, or their art influences their heritage, and you know what other thoughts they have around art and politics and things like that. So yeah.
So we are approaching the end of our time slot here, but I'd love to give you just the opportunity to sort of plug your work and let us know where we can purchase Buah Zine and, you know, find more from you.
Yeah, so I will share the screen again. So if you go on buahzine.wordpress.com and you go to About Buah Zine, and then you go to You Can Also Buy Issue 1 and 2, and then blam. And then you can buy it online here. I know shipping is a menace. So if you live in the US, you know, and you're interested in buying a copy, I have, you know, physical zines, and I do want to make them, you know, I have paper copies too. So, you know, if you're comfortable with, you can email me and say, you know, how interested you are, and do a sliding scale, and yeah, and do it that way too if you want to not be encumbered by the shipping costs on Blurb. So yeah, so it's here. You can see it on buahzine.wordpress.com/about. Also, you know, we're on Instagram. So, you know, DMs are open, and also the email is open as well. You know, if you want to email your comments and concerns and thoughts, it's buahzine@gmail.com. I'm open. It might take some time to email people just because emailing, it takes a lot of energy, but I want to, you know, always respond to people. So, you know, please feel free to DM me, to email me.
Well, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your work and, yeah, your zine. I love it.
Thank you so much for having me. Second year DC Zine Fest. So great. Always a great time at DC Zine Fest. So thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely a little different this year, but I'm glad that we can all, you know, get together and do this something digitally anyways.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And y'all stick around for other people and the rest of the Zine Fest. Check out the tablers as well at dczzinefest.com. And there's a lot of zines that you can purchase. And as you can see, I love my zines. So, you know, support the other zine makers, please.
Well, thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. Learned a lot of useful things, and you stole my spiel, but I will reiterate